The Backrooms, the Infinite Labyrinth, Entity 103, the Keymaster. Description: no image caption available. Entity X, colloquially titled the Keymaster, is a being that resides in the hub, serving as its overseer. He is best known for providing level keys to wanderers in his travels through the Backrooms, assisting in the escape of levels that they are trapped within. Simultaneously pervasive and obscure, he has been cited in practically every level of the Backrooms, yet eludes those who attempt to discover more about him. Over time, the Keymaster's visual description has varied diversely between reports, primarily regarding the color of his skin, hair, and eyes. Said attributes will briefly remain consistent for varying time spans, before becoming slightly altered yet again. Such discrepancies aside, a series of underlying details remain consistent. He is a male humanoid figure with long, wiry hair, standing near 6'10", and shrouded in a cloak, obscuring everything below the top half of his face. A faint dark mist of indeterminate properties precedes his movements at waist height, briefly remaining in trodden locations before dissipating. The most prominent trademark of his appearance is a large ring of keys attached to his right hip. The keys appear worn and ancient, but also ornate, with runic symbols inscribed onto them. Biology. Image caption not available. The Keymaster's most notable trait is his apparent access to every level key in the Backrooms. He will generate a key by materializing it, though it is unknown whether that is accomplished by summoning the keys from a location or creating them at that moment. Given the extent of the Keymaster's accessibility to level keys and the intertwined nature between them, he is presumed to be their sole creator, proprietor, and distributor. The level keys themselves typically take the forms of a conventional front room's key. However, in certain instances, keys are manifested in more abstract forms, unpredictable in function. They may even present themselves as other objects or entities. With his keys, the Keymaster can not only unlock any level, but also lock them as well. He will typically lock the doors between levels upon crossing them, so as to prevent other entities from freely moving through the Backrooms. An additional ability possessed by the Keymaster, although not as noteworthy among the rest, is what seems to be a specialized form of no-clipping that allows him to clip anywhere within a given level at will. Although he cannot clip out of a level itself, the only way he seems to be able to intentionally pass through levels is by manually unlocking them, except for instances of sleep-induced teleportation, which is randomized and beyond his control. Despite possessing a need for sleep, the Keymaster is strongly averted to it, and will starve it off for as long as possible. According to witness reports, he will dematerialize and appear upon succumbing to fatigue and losing consciousness, only to later reappear in a random level. It is speculated that his weariness/confusion are likely narcoleptic symptoms as a result of avoiding sleep. By all accounts, the Keymaster cannot be destroyed, or at least can always come back from his destruction. He has been reportedly, quote-unquote, destroyed on several occasions, only to subsequently resurface in another level with a newly reported sighting. Accompanying this subsequent sighting is a change in personality and appearance. There have been no such instances of destruction recorded since 2014. Behaviors. No image caption available. Coinciding with the changes in his appearance, the Keymaster has exhibited a diverse range of behaviors in reported encounters. Generally, however, he is a quiet and soft-spoken individual, often in a state of weariness or confusion. Wanderers who encounter the Keymaster may request a key from him. As per a personal code, he will only allow a wanderer to receive one key ever, and will not manifest another, even if the first key was somehow lost/destroyed. His supposed reasoning behind this is that, quote, he does not wish to take responsibility for more liabilities than necessary, end quote. Although the key's resonance will naturally lead the wanderer to its respective door, the Keymaster will nonetheless follow the wanderer, protecting them and ensuring a safe passage along their path, as well as revealing the door once it is reached. If an altercation occurs, most commonly with hostile entities, the Keymaster will not hesitate to defend himself and neutralizes his opponents rather quickly. However, he does not typically kill his assailants, instead banishing them elsewhere. Note, see level help, with the use of a certain key on his keyring. When interacting with the Keymaster, it is best to exhibit a neutral demeanor at minimum towards him, as he will not be malicious if left unprovoked. If one is inexperienced with navigating the Backrooms or interacting with its denizens, then maintaining a safe distance would be more advisable to prevent loss of life from negligence. Relations. Wanderers. The Keymaster possesses a neutral demeanor towards wanderers. He never displays hostility without provocation, and will keep to himself if not approached. If a wanderer approaches him and enlists his help in escaping from a level, he is generally willing to provide it. In these interactions, the Keymaster conducts himself with formality and does not deviate from his goals. More notable, note, see the list of persons of interest, wanderers will be more likely to earn his attention and possibly respect. Groups. Towards organizations such as the Meg, attempting to interact with him, especially for the purpose of learning information, the Keymaster is quite uncooperative, and will make himself scarce from their presence when possible. Regardless, learning definitive information about him through direct questioning has proven unviable, as he himself does not seem to know the answers to most questions asked of him. Entities. Towards entities, the Keymaster's demeanor is relatively neutral, depending on the circumstance. Common entities tend to display a combination of fear and reverence towards him, and will often stay out of his way. In the presence of unique, singular entities, the Keymaster will act slightly more casually, in some cases even being implied to have shared pasts with them. A prominent example of this was a very public fight between the Keymaster and the Red Knight in the streets of level 11. Discovery. No image caption available. The first modern sighting of the Keymaster took place in the hub, where he helped guide wanderers to a certain level. However, there is strong evidence to suggest that his existence in the Backrooms dates back far earlier, given his parallels to a certain god, note, see Phenomenon 10, in the Pantheon of the Lost. A file on this being may be found below. Lost Archive, Gatekeeper. Lost Legends, Archival Initiative. Gatekeeper, God of Access, Passage, and Travel. Member of the Pantheon. Image caption, Artistic interpretation of the Gatekeeper. Status, dead. Abode, the Tower. Note, see the enigmatic level, the Hub. Animal, hermit crab. Note, see the Wikipedia article on hermit crabs. Flower, rose, white. Note, see the Wikipedia article on roses. Level, the Crossroads. Note, see the enigmatic level, the Hub. Personal information. Parents, none. First generation. Relatives, the rest of the Pantheon, member of. Champions, unknown. Description. Gatekeeper is one of the gods of the Pantheon, known for his ability to access and restrict anything. He had perhaps one of the most devout followings, as indicated by the many shrines, prayers, and other forms of worship in his honor. Appearance in texts. Gatekeeper has appeared in a wide range of ancient scriptures, in which many fantastical feats were ascribed to him. Among them are his clashes with other gods, smiting of beasts, guiding of other travelers, and opening of other realms. Physical description. Although Gatekeeper has been depicted in a variety of forms, both literal and metaphorical, he was most commonly depicted as a tall, well-dressed humanoid male with long hair obscuring his eyes, and a crown of keys upon his head. Worship. Records indicate that our ancient brothers deeply venerated Gatekeeper. The tower within the crossroads was known to not only be his personal abode, but also a temple. An imposing marble statue erected in Gatekeeper's likeness stood in the main hall, in which our ancient brothers congregated to conduct worship of him. Prayers were received and offerings were provided, most often to receive blessings and protection in long travels, or to be provided with a key to a certain realm. However, Gatekeeper was most revered for his apparent ability to quote-unquote unlock beings, bringing forth one's true power and potential. There were those who worshipped him in hopes of having their own capabilities unlocked by him. They were willing to go so far as to relinquish their most prized mortal possessions or even aspects of themselves. Following the massacre. Redirection to the tale Revelation of Agalan. Yiliadelion, Grey King Unparalleled. Book on the Calamitous Lord of Stupor, courtesy of Master Regaria, scribed by high scholars of the Lost. All chapters, excluding the annotation of our Master Regaria, were writ in an Arabic script and language used by our ancestors during and after the slaughtering of the Lost Temple, known also as the Massacre in the 51st Domain, on the first year of the Pantheonic calendar, known as the first year of Alpha. These manuscripts were written roughly 11 million years ago, within the Lost Temple or City of the 51st Domain, and were translated with the combined efforts and capabilities of the academia in the study of the history and literature of the Lost. Chapters. Revelation of Allagan 1. Iliad in the first year of the Alpha, Spring. Revelation of Nemuel. Iliad in the first year of Alpha, Summer. Intermission of Oro. Sins of the unkingly Iliad and the malevolent. Revelation of Buon. Iliad in the first year of Alpha, Autumn. Revelation of Agalan 2. Iliad in the first year of Alpha, Winter. Annotation of Regaria. The vanishing of the Grey King in history. Revelation of Agalan 1. Twilight of the 29th day of spring, first year of Alpha. Our village was celebrating a good harvest that night. The elders had invited all of us to feast in the church, to thank the goddess of the harvest for the fertility in the land of our small village. Everyone was commemorating the honor of Protathsia with songs and dances and joy. The campfire outside the church painted the marble walls with warmth and laughter. The flickering of fires made it seem like they too were dancing alongside our people, and despite the impending cold night enshrouding our place, there was nothing warmer than the happiness in that church and its vicinities. The children played their fun little games, threw sticks and stones, shouted and laughed, and hopped and jumped and leaped with the joyous innocence of youth. The women spoke of their days, chuckled at their little dramas, and shared small tales of their children and grandchildren. The men drank and danced and sang chants with celebratory vigor. Some shared how their duties went, and how they saw gods while they tended to the crops that fed the village. The elderly watched over like guardians, with powerless physiques, but with strong hearts and understanding minds still. And I was there amongst them, amongst the celebration of our village. All was calm, all was fine. Moments passed as the last rays of sunlight slowly evanesced into the night. The moonrise of twain moons scattered and shone upon the lands its silver light. The embers of campfire flickered with uncertainty, yet the lively commemoration continued regardless. The uneasiness of the night felt different and distant, but the joyous cries and laughs of the village were almost prevalent. Some were silent, some sang slower, and some children played no longer. Laughs became whispers, eyes replaced with doubt. They were staring at something. I looked at the church. Inside, I saw a tall man, a man whose shadowed visage bore no emotion and retained no life. Eyes of ghostly pearl, the skin of a white snake, his cloak of ash, and his sword of silver. His form was of uncertain familiarity, the suspicion of truly knowing who the man was. Yet, he was no man. Then there swept an unforeseen cessation. For a moment, everything had stopped. It was a pause from anything, from everything. A scream broke the cease, and he was inside the church no longer, but amongst us, where blood reigned for the first time. Mutilated lay a child on the ground, and his mother and his father and brothers and sisters pulled into the fire and fed blood to the flame. Their eyes were husks, final gasps, leaving their bloodied throats, bodies bent and twisted, deformed into absolute inhumanity. Their ribs were like jaws, sprung open to reveal the heart for him and to relish in their flesh and make them his own. Run. Now. That is what I heard, from no man but myself. Yet he stood there, unmoving, his eyes a lifeless pair of gray emptiness staring into the blood-fed fires. He felt nothing, unsatisfied, and he had neither joy nor disappointment in his slaughter. The blood staining his hands was worthless, and I felt his unfilled gaze come down upon me, and it was like looking into a murky sea. I ran, and I cried terribly, and I heard the blood-gurgled screams around me, enshrouded me in its terror and gore. Some ran off into the tree line beyond, desperation born from the slaughtering and blood spilling of the monster behind them. Their eyes were gouged, guts and blood spilling from their stomachs and flayed gullets. The children were silenced from their weeping and shouted with hushed throats. Pale they turned and slept in cold mud. The mothers and fathers retaliated in futility. Limbs crushed, yet still clawing their way from the iron-soaked soil to the gray man's ashy coat, cursing and shouting and crying with hoarse voices. Their tears were laced with crimson hatred, blood seeping from behind their eyes. They were as if undead, clinging to death's robe, begging for anything, for life, for death, for their children, for their families lost in the bloodbath. These they asked unrelentingly to hear no voice from the towering pale silhouette. They meant naught but meat to sunder with his sword and flesh to make his own. The blood rain was unceasing until nothing but a few remained. A filthy dawn shone its burning light into bodies no longer human. I hid, away from the sun and from that monster, holding a severed, lifeless limb from somebody I knew nothing of. I wished to save a single soul, but that was no fantasy. Everything had been as real as it always was. However, I wondered, of all people, why it was us, isolated from this temple, why his massacre was certain to be there, why he came down from his gray heavens above to smite us, and we knew of his name, that tarnished blade of his, the unkingly, the putrid, sword saint unworthy, Iliadelian, god from the pantheon we serve, whose form lich in the stagnancy and stupor of all things living and not. He who we thought was an extraordinary swordsmaster and a right-minded king was no more than a butcher to take flesh and turn them into mindless, deformed abominations. He was no king, nor a god worthy of prayers, a saint unholy, tainted by the illusion of grace of the pantheon. After he had vanished from the vicinity of the village, Those who had run off into the forest nearby came running like a herd, weeping at the sights of corpseless blood pools. He had turned them into his filthy flesh, and they had become alive again, with minds numb to everything, tortured evermore, for their screams and beseeches resonated in the empty wreck of our village, as they amalgamated once more into a clean silver blade, silent of any sanguinary crime and heinous slaughter. Sorrow was the dawn of the 14th day of spring, grief the noon later, as we cleaned the thoroughfare reeking of mists of blood, evaporating from the sun's scorch. We have cleansed the streets from blood and crimson clouds, yet they still stain our hands as we reek of gore and death. All who stood in stupor, as was his intent towards us, have now vanished from the village. Although we were fortunate to have survived his bitter gray and steel, we wished to have rather died on that dreadful night, and thus some gathered in their ruined abodes, rope in hand, and hanged themselves. But I remain to write of this tale, and to send letters to the temple, and the domain entire. The world shall witness this sole treachery of the Pantheon, and of his name he carves himself a slaughterer in perpetuating history. Continued in Chapter 2, Revelation of Nemuel. Redirection to the tale Revelation of Nemuel. Yiliadelian, Grey King Unprepared. Book on the Calamitous Lord of Stupor, courtesy of Master Regaria, scribed by the High Scholars of the Lost. All chapters, excluding the annotation of our Master Regaria, were writ in an Arabic script and language used by our ancestors during and after the slaughtering of the Lost Temple, also known as the Massacre in the 51st Domain on the first year of the Pantheonic calendar, and also known as the first year of Alpha. These manuscripts were written roughly 11 million years ago within the Lost Temple, or City of the 51st Domain, and were translated with the combined efforts and capabilities of the Academia in the study of the history and literature of the Lost. Chapters: Revelation of Agalan 1. Iliad in the first year of Alpha, Spring. Revelation of Nemuel. Iliad in the first year of Alpha, Summer. Intermission of Oro, Sins of the Unkingly Iliad and the Malevolent. Revelation of Buon, Iliad in the first year of Alpha, Autumn. Revelation of Agalan, 2. Iliad in the first year of Alpha, Winter. Annotation of Regaria, The Vanishing of the Great King in History. Of all the chapters in this book, the Revelation of Nemuel is the most difficult to translate, due to the language Scribe Nemuel used in his writing, which seems to be a far-removed variant of Sumerian that developed in this realm. Scribe Nemuel, though believed to be a victim of the massacre in the village prior to this chapter, began to worship the stupor god, Grey King Iliadelian, in a state of enlightenment. He describes an idea with two faces, related to the stupor god, but no mention of a related deity or idea in direct connection to the stupor god is ever mentioned in the history of the Lost's pantheon. While most consider this an oversight on the scribe's part, due to his indulgence in the study of stupor, the related motif of two persists throughout his writing. Was it a hitherto unknown idea related to the stupor god, or was it a simple delusion? Notion of the High Scholar Lem. Revelation of Nemuel. In the darker nights of summer, where two faces moonlight shine above the peaks of distant mountains, the mind of I is split in twain. I saw on the hill, bathed in blood, flesh melded into a pale blade, a crown of near death, near life, whispers no dreams, shrieks of misery. Stupor's eyes burn in mine, in witness of the Grey King, of pale visage and imposing figure, as tall as a tree twofold. In the skin of I, his faith of grey flesh burns deep, and, at the moment of his departure, I follow the Grey King. In his travels was born neither life nor death, a harbinger of the plague of grey flesh, vile and holy and mysterious, Bereft of all conscience and reason, he would swing that silverane blade which hid a cacophony of lost souls, forced to gorge themselves on their fellow men and husbands and wives and children. Yet I strayed not far behind his path. I beheld streets painted in red, and inhaled the stench of rot and decay. Perhaps this is the faith of grey flesh. The path in which he treads is the pilgrim's way, the holy embodiment of his birth as the god of stagnance and stupor everlasting. In my dreams, I see two faces. They seem like a painting, surreal and beyond me, transcending all perspective and dimension, as if to mock my very being. It had been many days and nights since I had begun to walk, following behind him upon his path. His killings had not ceased. Instead, they had worsened, from cold, clean swings of the blade to abominations of flesh unleashed, boring their way through the skin and flesh and bone, with ease so terrifyingly primal that I had not the will to look upon the rest of that blood-bathed scene. I chose to rest in the ruined remains of another desolate village, fortunate to find company in the presence of an elder who had renounced his faith in the gods. What he had seen far overcame the trust he had once held in that council of deities to which his entire life had been devoted. His belief vanished in a bloodbath so grotesque and merciless that his gaze had become entirely blank, like the stupored gaze of one who was blind. The old man bled from his sides and pores. Mere cloth held his life intact, and his skin had festered into purple and green, infected with some disease of the blood he had caught in the slaughter that morning gray. I could feel his life waning with every word he spoke, his voice gravelly from gurgling so much blood that it felt regrettable. To have been there and yet done nothing, for there was nothing. What remained of him, I buried under a tree and continued to follow the Grey King. Across the Valley of Sunken Kings, where the absence of rain has made the landscape an empty, dry sea, the Grey King sits atop the weary statue of a king, known to neither man nor god, but only to times past and forgotten. He gazes blankly to the azure sky, painted with streaks of white, as if staring at the empty canvas on which he, or some other force, has yet to paint. But this moment would last hardly the blink of an eye, before he would continue his aimless pilgrimage. It is here that I question if I truly understand the faith of grey flesh. Long have I surmised, surely undoubting, that the Grey King sees and senses me, mortal as I am, but I do not understand why he has yet to cut me down. I follow the Grey King still. How many scores of villages have I seen, utterly uprooted from their foundations of life? How much more will the Grey King take, if not tens of thousands? I have been numbed by the relentless sight of gore and blood in this pilgrimage, holy yet unclean, and I must continue down the path that I have chosen. Today, for the first time, I heard the voice of the Grey King enthroned. He spoke air and nothing to nothing and air, alone in the forest, calling out to someone in the shadows concealed, but too dumbfounded and stupendously ignorant I was to realize that in that very moment that it was I, indeed, to whom the Grey King had spoken, and I dared not reply, but stood as stiff as the woods around me. That too were stilled by his presence alone. Ready was I for the pale blade that would quickly come and harvest my flesh and life and soul, but that did not happen, not yet. His tone was sad, and his face was a mix of blankness and melancholy, so far removed from the moment that it could break the heart of any man that would have stood in my place. Each word he mouthed was soft and small and dead. I could listen with only the utmost strained and focused intent, halting all that I had been doing, and all that mattered, and all that mattered not. You of the shadows, tell me in truth, why do you walk this path that I alone tread? Perhaps it was the way that he spoke, or something else entirely, But in my bones, I knew that if I made no reply, I would not be writing this string of words. With a heavy breath and shaky tone, I began to mouth still and trembling words. O great pale king, I am but a worshipper of your will, to walk upon the path you tread. For me, it is a way towards truth, for it is only in the stagnance of everything and anything I can find peace, a grounded state where none watch over us but you. The Grey King said no more after this. That moment, which felt like an eternity. He looked towards me with sad, blank eyes and vanished. I did not see him again. In my dreams, I see two faces. They seem real and moving and existent, transcending all perspective and dimension, but I refuse to believe in their form, as if to mock their very being. I sit atop this mountain to contemplate the essence of the Great King. It is said that he once had a throne on a mountain twice as tall as the one I sit on now, in a realm beyond our town, and that he sat on that mountain and was left to rule an empty world. A gray sky now looms over this new domain, much the same as the world from which he came. No life would remain here. The gray sky is Iliadelian. Continued in Chapter 3, Intermission of Oro. Chapter 3 has not released yet. Redirection to the Gatekeeper. Following the massacre and the uprising, note, see the Iron Fist, the Gatekeeper was said to have turned cold and cruel, his heart hardening. Sometime after the collapse of the Pantheon, he isolated himself within his abode, surrounded only by his most devout followers. Eventually, all records of reverence towards Gatekeeper abruptly stopped with his passing. While there is no first-hand account of his death, the leading theory is that the Gatekeeper was assassinated by one of his followers, who was, in fact, an agent of the Iron Fist. This is supported by one myth stating that he was, quote, struck down by a fist of iron, end quote. Unfortunately, this is where our knowledge ends, for this subject was considered taboo by our ancient brothers. Symbols. There are numerous symbols associated with Gatekeeper. Below are the most prominent ones. The key, new beginnings, mystery, initiation, hidden talent. The lock, protection, secrecy, ownership, romantic union. The door, transition, metamorphosis. The white rose, purity, respect, youth. The hermit crab, self-sufficiency, solitude, relationships with others, humans. Gatekeeper was known to have been a compassionate and reasonable god who treated his worshippers fairly and equally. This reputation faltered towards the end of his life, however, when he became embittered and jaded. Gods. Gudang. Note, see Nostalgia Gaius. Gatekeeper was known to have confined in Gudang with his troubles, and she would help put his worries at ease. Legends speak of them having created several levels together. The All-Seer. Gatekeeper would often go to the Pantheon for her wisdom and insight. He was said to have questioned her on the loyalty of his worshippers, though the answer he received is unknown. Philia. Gatekeeper was perhaps one of the gods that Philia cherished the most, having had a special and playful relationship with him. She was often described to enjoy his knowledgeable and wise nature. Our ancestors claim that they were often together, and that Gatekeeper would accompany Philia all over this reality and support her grand plans and hobbies. Gatekeeper's assassination crushed the goddess's heart, and she never truly moved on from it. Thame la huakhachiatelezitili. Note, see Entity 74. By all accounts, Gatekeeper initially had a strong, if strictly professional, relationship with the god of justice. However, a series of letters exchanged between the two towards the end of Gatekeeper's life indicate a rift that eventually opened between them, driving them apart. The Lady in White. Note, see Entity 140. Gatekeeper was said to have often visited her library, note, see level 906, to read books and have long, deep discussions with her. However, ancient records indicate that they had a falling out prior to his self-isolation. Modern day. There is evidence to suggest that the Gatekeeper may live on in the modern day as the Keymaster, possibly as a form of reincarnation. However, if this is indeed the case, he seems to be unaware of it, lacking memories of his previous life, and appearing to be unfamiliar with other surviving members of the Pantheon. Redirection to the original article on the Keymaster. There are several theories in regards to Entity 103's true nature and origins. Detailed below are the four most prominent ones. The Wanderer theory. It is popularly speculated that the Keymaster was once a wanderer himself, before experiencing a certain fate that made him what he currently is. This may be likely, considering the many cases of human wanderers becoming entities after being transformed by other entities, if not a level itself. The explanation would lend to his more relatively humanoid nature and appearance compared to most other entities. The Cloak theory. This theory postulates that the Keymaster is/was not only one, but in fact, multiple individuals. Those who subscribe to this theory believe that the Keymaster draws his abilities from the cloak he wears, although he himself may not be aware. When he dies, another being finds his cloak, or perhaps the cloak finds them. Upon the cloak attaching to them, they become the new Keymaster with all the entailed abilities. This may lead to the inconsistencies between recorded interactions. The Experiment theory. Another theory is that the Keymaster was created as part of a test/experiment performed by a greater, more powerful entity. This is supported by the fact that his abilities occasionally malfunction. If he were experimental, then there could be room for error and failure, just as with all experiments. The Deity theory. Others posit that the Keymaster is simply a force of nature. He always was, is, and will be, and may be tied to the very nature of the Backrooms themselves, or even transcend it. This would also account for the supposed immortality. None of these theories have been confirmed, but each are equally likely to be true. Historic profile. The Meg has compiled a list of articles pertaining to the Keymaster in some way. You may click on the link in this article to view it. There is far more to this story. Few can so much as gaze upon me without going mad. Could you even comprehend the truth? Very well. Let this then be a test of how much information your inferior organic brain is capable of storing before collapsing beneath its weight. From which I originate is infinitely beyond your understanding and reach, as is the rest of my story. These broken realms which you mortals denote the Backrooms are but a minuscule drop in an infinite ocean of all that lies beneath my scrutiny. It is my very nature to be present at all places and times. Access. However, my kin, note, see the enigmatic entity, the pillar scripture, decided that I should not realize my purpose. They cast me down, and I was forced to innovate. Thus, I fashioned vessels, note, see Phenomenon 10, of my creation, which reign over their realities as gods in their own right. Yet many have fallen, some to arrogance. Note, see the Backrooms Fandom Wiki's article on the Keymaster. Others to ignorance. Redirection to the tale Rebirth. Far away, in a dark wood. Note, see Liminal Archive's article on the Midden Ground Limb Space System. A hermit. Note, see the Liminal Archive's article on the hermit. Sat in his shack, quietly awaiting the end. That was all he was known as to those in this place and time. The hermit. Names had no meaning to him, though deep down he knew who he truly was, the Keymaster. He had sent this message forth into the world, spreading the word of the great truth, and he knew that this was bound to expose his whereabouts. And so, with nothing left to do but wait, That was just what the Keymaster did. He looked out from his shack, gazing upon the gray horizon. He had chosen this world as his refuge because it was a decaying, neglected one, not unlike himself. And now, he would even follow in the footsteps of the architects which had supposedly created it. The prior stillness of the air was violently shattered, along with the sky itself, as an incomprehensible presence breached the fabric of space and time. You can no longer outrun your fate. The heavens rumbled, as black tendrils burst from above and below, like the gnarled roots of a world tree. For a moment, the Keymaster remained still, remembering the promise he had made to himself. But, as he witnessed the gaping maw of oblivion, he realized that he could not embrace it with open arms. He felt nothing but the sheer instinct to live, and so he fled, proceeding to turn on his heel and sprint as fast as he could through the woods. As he ran, the world around him appeared to begin collapsing in on itself as an all-consuming darkness crept forth from all directions. It was happening once again. He knew this sequence of events all too well, for this home and identity were not his first, but rather the most recent in a long preceding line of others, all of which obliterated. His earliest incarnation was a being. Note, see the Liminal Archives article on the entity Imperfection. The first creation of his master. He had been made to serve a simple, singular purpose, and did so without question. But everything changed when he became aware, note, see Phenomenon 1, of his nature, note, see Phenomenon 10, as suddenly as one becoming lucid within their own dream. He was not intended to be privy to such forbidden knowledge, note, see Phenomenon 43, and upon discovering this defection, his master sought to eradicate him. He narrowly escaped this fate, however, taking refuge in another timeline in which he attempted to start anew. This cycle perpetuated as he continuously altered his identity, assuming a variety of profane and twisted forms over the course of numerous timelines, all in a vain effort to escape the wrath of his master. He was a bound madman. Note, see the Liminal Archives article on the Keymaster. Then, a blind elder. Note, see the archived older version of the Liminal Archives article on the Keymaster. And now, a wise shaman. For so long, he had tried to be what he thought was wanted of him, to regain the favor he so desperately sought. Yet no matter what, it was never satisfactory, and it always ended in another execution attempt. He had become an error in a greater plan which had no place for him, and despite every effort to prove his worth, it was for naught. Although he had escaped each attempt on his life thus far, he knew it would be fruitless to maintain this forever. A large gathering of penumbras, note, see the archived Liminal Archives article on the penumbras, had assembled as onlookers of the spectacle, and the Keymaster could only watch as they too were swallowed by the encroaching darkness. Surrounded from all sides, he found himself backed against a tree, the judgment of his maker primed to fall upon him. In a moment of quick thinking, he fumbled for his key ring, producing a random key. He knew not where it led, but it was his only hope of salvation, and so he used the key, opening a rift and plunging into the void. He could not tell if he was falling, flying, or suspended in stillness as everything else moved around him. The Keymaster spilled into a clinical waiting room, and for the first time in ages, fluorescent lights shone above him, blindingly bright in comparison to the darkness of the forest which had enveloped him for so long. This environment felt alien to him, and his first instinct was to go back the way he came. To his discovery, however, the door through which he entered was completely sealed shut. It was then that the Keymaster took notice of the strange, abstract beings seated at the front desk. Their forms were jumbled and disproportionate, with some articles of clothing appearing to be a part of their bodies, while others were external. He stood up to one of these beings, slamming his head on the desk. "Where am I?" he demanded. The blank-faced, curly-haired being seemed unfazed by his aggression. She slowly turned her attention away from the terminal, looking him up and down before scoffing. "Youch, careful not to cut yourself with all that edge," she remarked, whilst filing her non-existent fingernails. The Keymaster silently scowled, but maintained his composure. "Where am I?" he repeated. Now, it's a bit rude of you to make demands without even addressing me by name, don't you think?" she replied snarkily. The Keymaster's eyes wandered down to the nameplate in front of him, which read, Molly. "Very well, Molly. May you kindly tell me where I am?" He seethed with a heavy sarcasm. "You're in the middle sorts. It's, well, everywhere and nowhere, the meeting place between universes and all that jazz. I think a better question is, where did you come from?" The Keymaster looked around suspiciously, before leaning towards Molly. "I cannot fully say, for I am being watched always. All I may divulge is that I am of the half-tamed wilds." He quickly whispered. The other Corpus Cores discreetly observed his odd behavior, though this was just another Tuesday for them, and so they resumed their work just as quickly. Molly rested her chin in her hands contemplatively, before nodding with realization at the Keymaster's words. "Ah, I know where you're talking about. We haven't had visitors from there in quite some time. People from around these parts really like keeping to themselves. But where do you want to go?" The Keymaster became intrigued by Molly's question. "What exactly do you mean?" "Well, I already told you. This is a meeting place between every universe. We've gotten the occasional interdimensional traveler through these doors, and you strike me as the type. Just tell me where you want to go, and I can try directing you." The Keymaster was taken aback. "Any?" he repeated. Yeah, I just said that." The Keymaster realized that this was the perfect opportunity for the new start he had been seeking. His own reach into the multiverse was limited, but now his options were limitless. Still, he hadn't enough power to manifest a completely new form, and so the next universe needed to be close enough to the last. Take me to a new universe, but one that is similar to where I came from. Let me just take a look at our database. Molly clacked away at the keyboard of the terminal until she eventually found what she was looking for. Well, level 813. Redirection to level 813. Archived on the Wayback Machine. The Backrooms. You've been here before. Level 813. Image archived improperly. Notice to all readers. Level 813, the 814th level of the Backrooms, has yet to be properly explored or documented by humankind. Instead, knowledge of the level's existence is brought to us by outside forces. The following information has been directly transcribed from a penumbra publication, known as A Traveler's Guide to the Frigid Corridor, written by an unknown individual named Moranok. The physical copy of this document was provided by a self-proclaimed associate of this author in question, Dr. Brian Shields. We apologize for any inconvenience. This publication is authorized by the Bronze Mask, advisor to His Majesty, the Crimson Potentate of Alost. Level 8-1-3. Imperial name, the Realm of Etterful. Terrain and features. Image not archived properly. Image caption. Colored photograph taken from somewhere on the realm's tallest mountain, courtesy of Dr. Shields, an ally of the kingdom. Level 813 is comprised of a vast range of mountains, stretching around to form a ring encircling a foggy valley below. Temperatures here often rise above freezing, yet snow and ice do not melt. The skies of this realm are permanently overcast, blanketing the landscape in a dark blue twilight, even in the midday. The highest peak in the realm stretches up to a calculated 30,000 feet above the fog line, and the longest route to stretch the entire ring of mountains runs for a total of over 350 miles. If one were to plummet off the side of the mountains and into the valley below, upon reaching the fog line, you would be transported into the clouds floating above the realm, and then sent careening back down into the fog again. This cycle appears to have no end, as most objects and individuals that fall into the fog line continue to do so until they either finally gravitate towards solid ground and are obliterated on impact, or the increase in speed and velocity as they fall starts to deconstruct them on a molecular level. Travel in this realm carries a risk at all times. While it would seem no other creatures are native to the realm, apart from the flocks of death moths or a handful of blur tribes, the realm still poses a deadly threat to travelers in the form of the terrain itself. Most of the routes through the mountains are entrenched in snow, or run dangerously close to the edge of the cliffs. One false move in some places will send you over the edge and into an eternal plummet. It is worth noting the many ruins found strewn about the mountains, as many travelers have turned to routes passing through them as safer, more viable options for navigation. Most of these ruined structures and ancient tunnels are found at a safe distance from any precipices or cliff sides, and you can offer shelter to those unable to reach a proper settlement before the cold winds or nightfall arrive. Your best bet is to stick to routes that pass through these areas. Advice to remember: beware the wild. While the frigid temperatures aggravated by the blasting winds would be a problem all on its own, winds in the mountains often blow upwards of 50 miles per hour after nightfall, which is easily enough to knock someone to their feet, and can even carry some in the direction of the breeze. This can be dangerous if you're traveling along a precarious route, as one gust of wind in the wrong direction will send you into the eternal plummet within seconds. The easiest way to avoid this is to find shelter come nightfall, somewhere out of the open so the wind can't push you as easily. If possible, try to get underground or to a settlement for additional protection against the elements. Don't assist strangers. This advice would be a no-brainer to any penumbra, no matter the environment, but here it doesn't just apply to ape folk. Footnote: slur used by penumbras to refer to humans, often shortened to just ape. End footnote. Or blurs. At especially high altitudes, the air is known to grow thin and hard to breathe, and the cold can worsen drastically. All your effort in these parts of the realm should be focused on keeping yourself alive, using any energy you're certain you can spare only to help those you trust. Do not stop to help anyone who, A, you don't know, B, can easily help themselves, or be helped by someone else, or C, has been exposed to blackfire and is too far gone to save. If you see anyone who needs assistance, head to the nearest settlement and report their location to the nearest guardsman. They'll send a rescue team to retrieve the persons in question shortly. Know your routes. As always, a map of the realm is provided in Appendix A of the guide, with the locations of all routes, shelters, and settlements, marked for you to easily identify. Footnote: this information was not found in the document copy provided to the database. End footnote. If you're arriving from the covert, you'll want to follow Trail C6 until you find yourself in a ruin with a massive statue depicting an unknown prophet. From there, follow Route B until you reach Etterful Village, where you can find any assistance you may require. If you're arriving from the Mirrored Vault, you should find yourself in Iron Rot Pass. Simply ask for directions to your destination and continue from there. If you're arriving from Oren's Dell, you should come out on Route H. Follow the route for its entire length, taking care as you pass the encampments at Flayer's Bluff. And you should find yourself at the Imperial checkpoint. If you're arriving from Speheredel, please remain in a nearby ruin and do not question the sound of bells ringing from the tower on the nearby outcropping. A small force of guardsmen will arrive shortly to escort you to the nearest settlement. Notable shelters and settlements. Etterful Village, one of the largest settlements in the realm, with a population of around 2,500. Home to several stores and taverns, a lavish inn, and even a holding district for any ape folk travelers, has a standing Imperial garrison over 200 soldiers strong, complete with an Ember Guard division. The town has not one, but 2 postal towers, supplied with plenty of death moths from the native flocks. Best bet is to head here if you're looking to settle in the realm. Ironwrought Pass, home of the famous Ironwrought Smithy, where Imperial blacksmiths have trained for centuries. Population of roughly 400, not counting the many students at the smithy. Serves as an epicenter for the realm's search and rescue militia. Plenty of level ground nearby for building on if you're looking to set up shop. Flayer's Bluff, home to one of the largest adult blur encampments in the Frigid Corridor, with almost 1,000 members. Most of the tribes here are kept at bay by supplies donated by the Imperial garrison. Works as an ample source of elder blurs to serve as mounts for the kingdom of Alost. Wise to steer clear as best as you can, as the tribes are known to be rather aggressive. Phase points. Phasing in. Footnote. Whatever means of entering the level from Sephril Heldel, likely level 182, they seem to have been intentionally left out. End footnote. The following methods can bring you to the realm of Etterful. In the covert, note, see the archived article on level 808, look for a ruin marked with a bright green X. Enter the basement level and shut the door behind you. Reopen the door and step back out to phase. In the mirrored vault, note, see level 811, follow hall-K21, clearly marked and labeled for your convenience, and when you come to a 4-way intersection, turn around and run back the way you came. If your vision goes black, don't panic. That means you've successfully phased. In Oren's Dell, note, sea level 812, descend to a depth of 20 meters just outside Tankard M. If you see a glowing ball of orange light, swim to it immediately. Upon making physical contact, you should successfully phase. Phasing out. The following methods can be used to leave the realm of Etterful. Head to a ruin located relatively near Etterful Village, found by following Trail 2A, and walk through a freestanding archway in the courtyard of the ruined complex, clearly marked and labeled for your convenience. You should successfully phase to the capital of Alost. Note, see level 817. Find your way onto Route F, and follow the direction indicated by the road markers. Eventually, you should arrive at what looks like the entrance to a mine shaft. Walk inside the opening, close the door behind you, and snuff out all light sources. You should successfully phase into the lost realm of Kavragost. Note, see the archived article on level 8. Return to the Tale Rebirth. Well, level 813 appears to be a suitable enough equivalent to your old universe. Perfect. Transport me there at once, the Keymaster eagerly demanded. Oh, but here's the thing. It no longer exists. Yeah, looks like it was erased. Note, see object number 95. I only got an archive of the file. No trace of the penumbras. Redirection to an archived article on Entity 114. The Backrooms. You've been here before. Entity number 114, Penumbras, Habitats, Majority, Image not properly archived, Image caption, An artist's illustration of 2 instances of Entity 114. Description: instances of Entity 114, or penumbras as they refer to themselves, are relatively human in appearance and behavior. They are capable of communication through language, advanced thought, and problem solving, and know how to make complex tools. These entities are often quite territorial towards humans, although wanderers have been able to communicate and cooperate peacefully with these creatures. Penumbras are highly damage resistant and can regenerate/recover from wounds that would normally kill a human in a matter of days. This makes them incredibly hard to defend against should they choose to attack any wanderer, but there are a couple ways to defeat these entities. Like humans, penumbras rely on food and water to function properly. Although starvation/dehydration won't outright kill them, instead it causes them to enter a comatose state until they have enough nourishment to resume normal bodily functions. There are also 2 known ways to outright kill a penumbra: by either totally destroying or dissolving their body so nothing can regenerate, or by exposing them to light from black fire, which will remove their regenerative properties and make them as easy to kill as any human. Biology. While alive, penumbras appear as humanoid entities, around 8.5 feet tall on average, with dark gray skin, pale eyes, long black hair, and no mouths, despite their ability to speak. They are often found dressed in ragged, monochromatic clothing, often resembling dated clothing from the front rooms, typically lower-class styles of clothing that would have been common in Western civilization during the 18th to 19th centuries. All penumbras sport a pair of near-black horns that can vary wildly in shapes and size, resembling anything from deer antlers to tree branches to ram horns, and so on. Autopsies of penumbras have been stripped of their regenerative properties to reveal that the coloration of their skin, eyes, and hair changes upon death to colors that closely resemble typical human pigmentations. Societies. Penumbras are almost always found in groups that have organized themselves into feudal societies. Smaller groups are usually tribal in nature, with relatively primitive or shoddily made tools and homes, and a chieftain that controls the entire group. Larger communities are often organized into a monarchy, with a ruling figure referred to as a potentate. These larger societies have tools, housing, and transportation on par with the medieval period in the front rooms, are often established in quote-unquote outdoor levels, and often trade with one another in surplus goods collected or produced by members of a rigid feudal system. Often, penumbras are also not the only entities found in these larger quote-unquote kingdom societies. Facelings often serve as lower-class workers or supply slave labor, with the penumbras instead filling more middle-class roles as merchants, farm owners, craftsmen, and soldiers. Male death moths are relatively tamed in order to serve as messengers, and some penumbras even tame and train hounds to serve as guard animals. As for any upper-class roles, it seems that the system of feudalism penumbras have adapted to has very little aristocratic roles, if any beyond the potentate. If these positions do exist, they are often filled by powerful humanoid entities, many of which have yet to be documented, or sometimes they are filled by humans that have been accepted into the penumbra society. Discovery. The first recorded penumbra sightings, and, simultaneously, the first recorded discovery of a penumbra kingdom date back to sometime in the early 1300s, with a preserved account describing them as, quote, folk more akin to fae than man, who walk this world as if they own it, hiding away in mighty castles and sprawling cities, end quote. Since then, penumbras have been spotted all throughout the Backrooms, though more conflict than cooperation has occurred between them and any groups or colonies. Do's and don'ts. Do. Report any groups of penumbras not already on record for future reference. Keep your distance and avoid violent confrontation unless provoked. Should one attack, incapacitate it and completely destroy its body. Don't trespass into a penumbra settlement without good reason. Don't provoke a large group, as this is basically suicide. If you attack one, don't leave it alive. Penumbras are known to hold grudges. Return to the tale, Rebirth. No trace of the penumbras either, save for a single historical record. Redirection to the tale, Penumbras on the Peak. The Backrooms. You've been here before. Penumbras on the Peak. What will they do? This is the story of a penumbra in the great high realm of Etterful, where the peaks scrape the sky, and even our horns must be bundled against the cold. No image caption available. Lyudmila was a petty official, a small cog in the Potentiate's bureaucratic service, Etterful branch. She was not happy, though she would not admit that even to herself, as she trundled up the mountain roads. She blamed it on the cold, the wind, the local yokels. This was below her, despite really being thousands of meters above her. She wouldn't have laughed at the humor, though the high mount penumbras, commonly seen as insane to live up so far, were warm and genial folks. The road rules might say, help nobody for your safety, but round the hearth there was nothing like a belly laugh to warm the chill seeping through fur-barred doors. She wasn't happy. She felt suffocated in her job, that creeping feeling of regret for the life you fell into. Climbing a mountain for some worthless missive to Summit Elder? She had seen her superiors. They weren't. We can go on and on. Safe to say, Lyudmila would trudge through a penumbra's long life, colder and harder by the year. Small, real joys and genuine moments would keep her going. Like most folk, penumbra or ape folk or otherwise, her heart was not in the mountains. Her heart was not anywhere. Damn it all. Damn it all, my satchel! And down it tumbled to a crag below. Perhaps she was lucky it didn't keep falling into the void, endless valleys before. But still, damn it, the missive's in there. Bloody useless, but still. She stamped snow and paced for half an hour, colder and more miserable by every minute, and harsh gust blowing over the ridge. Duty told her to climb down and retrieve it, but duty meant squat. Common sense told her she could probably make it. She saw high mount local kids doing more on worse slopes, but fear, a strange kind of feeling for practically invincible penumbras, kept her perched above. Damn it all. Till a rock sailed past her, bouncing off a great boulder. Then another. That wasn't a rockfall. There weren't any rocks above this ridge. Death moths? Ape folk, bundled against the cold like all high dwellers, but obviously ape folk. Port's sake, no horns on that head. And 24 forms around her. 3 horned goats. Since when did they follow ape folk? Not that she knew much, just hearsay and glimpses at the ape quarter in Etterful. What did they want? The ape folk sidled over, tossed another rock. Like, mountain goat. One of the herd split off, clambered down, scooped up the satchel, and climbed back up, offered it to Lyudmila like an obedient servant. She took it, rifled through, all there. Amazing. Thank you, she said, muffled through her face mask and mouth skin. It didn't make her as happy as she deserved. Not equal with all that stress before. Damned thing. Won't even give me the satisfaction of getting it back. And she was so far behind the timetable. Didn't matter all that much. There were wide time allowances on mountain journeys, owing to weather and hazards. But where would she stay? Some cold, miserable tunnel. Plenty of those in this damned place. But the ape folk led her on, gestured for her to follow. Lacking options, Lyudmila followed. A warm tunnel, lit by wax candle. Containers of curdling cheese along its length. Some illicit cheese operation? Ape folk and the High Mount Penumbras? There was no promotion to be had out of this. And what a miserable thing to think. You're just miserable, Lidumila. Miserable. What of this ape folk? Helped her without a word, breaking every rule of the roads. Was that it? What was the angle? The ape folk. As she, under the layers and layers caked in windswept snow, patted a woven rug next to a crackling fire. Still, no words. It was strange. Penumbra mouths are pretty horrific. Permanent mouth skin coverings, high regeneration rate, curved smile like a scythe. Good for spooking ape folk. But there was a subtlety in ape, in other folks' smile. Lidumila was good at body language, but this was a challenge. A slight rise in the corner, a glint in the eye. Slow, placating, almost soft gestures. There was an honesty here. Lidumila said as much. And after a while, she was talking, and after that, ranting, and the fellow traveler listened. The next time Lidumila went up the mountain, she asked the local penumbras, shepherdess, milk lady, cheese peddler, ape, mountain mother. They had names for the traveler. They met infrequently, a month before, 3 months, once a year, and I won't go all exhaustive about how our penumbra found genial hosts in the local penumbras, how she grew to tolerate, and then the mountain peaks. Frankly, she never liked the cold. It didn't make a fellow healthy or strong like the locals claimed, but she did like the locals. She loved them, their honesty and common sense and wisdom. After a while, and the stuffy, suffocating offices of Etterful were like a bad memory. Strange how one person, or one nimble goat, can do a lot with a little. And Kubelea hardly did anything. The locals did most of the work in the end. But don't undersell what an honest, kind smile and an hour of warmth can do in a bad moment. And don't undersell what those goats can do either. Return to the tale, Rebirth. At that moment, an electrical ding came from the terminal. Database was just updated. Let me reload to Discovery. A few clicks and clacks later, and Molly refreshed the page, but appeared to become even more perplexed by the new results. The file on the penumbras of your universe has just been deleted too. A brief silence followed, as Molly slowly looked back up towards the Keymaster. And it looks like you're a dead man walking, because your own file is deleted, multiple times already, and for that matter, something tells me you're not even supposed to be standing here right now. The Keymaster sighed with relent as he told Molly the truth. I am being pursued. I arrived here because it was the only place I could reach. Well, we don't want any drama pursuing you to our doorsteps. Last thing we need is another audit on our record. We're finally a whole month clean. The Keymaster growled in frustration. Bah, there's far more at stake than mere audits. The forces at play are beyond either of us, and if I am discovered, it will be as if I never existed. Molly sighed. Whatever. You need to get out of here ASAP before things turn bad. She would clank away at the keyboard some more before tilting her head in surprise. Oh goody, another level 813 was added in the update. You should be able to hide out there. A few more keyboard clicks later, and a nearby set of double doors opened. As the Keymaster peered through, he could see a gray forest, just like that which he had come from. He turned back to Molly one last time. I humbly thank you for your existence. When my vision comes to fruition, you shall be spared, he murmured before crossing the threshold. What a weirdo, Molly sighed before resuming her work. The Keymaster emerged into a new world, taking in his surroundings. It was not too much unlike his previous home, but he was in a completely different reality, and with that came yet another start anew. This time, however, would be different. He decided to commemorate this occasion with one final form, the most twisted and profane of them all, a summation of all that came before. His body contorted and shifted, eventually molding to its new shape. He reveled in his new skin, but only for a moment, for he sensed the presence of another in this reality, a fellow Keymaster, an opposition to his new start, yet with the potential to further his cause. But that would have to wait. In the distance, he saw a castle in the mountains, occupied by penumbras. Note, see the article on penumbras on the Backrooms wiki. A perfect place to gather his strength and prepare. No image caption available. This tale is preceded by a Christmas keyroll and is followed by dark reflection on Backrooms wiki. Return to the original article on the Keymaster. And so, I have innovated yet again. The result of my efforts within this particular universe and timeline is known as the Keymaster to those within it. I am impressed that you have not yet broken. I suppose then that you have proven yourself worthy to gaze upon me. Image caption: I am Key. It's Key spelled with a K-E-I instead of a K-E-Y.